Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another holiday bake-along. I am thrilled to share a festive dessert recipe that takes two of our favorite desserts, apple crisp and trifle, and puts them together. Yes, I am making my apple crisp trifle. Now, typically when you think of a trifle dessert, you think of cake, cream, and fruit, don't you? Well, did you know you can take an apple crisp, that combination of cooked apples with a cinnamony oat topping, and layer that with cream as well. And so that's how I'm creating my apple crisp trifle. Now, to do that, you're getting a bonus recipe. I am making a full apple crisp recipe. So you can serve this just on its own if you're looking for something simpler. So this you want to get done a day ahead because you want to give it a chance to cool and then chill completely in order to layer it in your trifle bowl. So right here, I have my diced apples, and I use the same kind of apples you would use in an apple pie, a tart cooking apple. That could be a Honeycrisp, a Granny Smith, whatever you have regionally, and that's in season. And to that, I only need to add a little bit of sugar. So just my 1/4 cup or 50 grams. And instead of adding cinnamon to my apples, I actually add just a splash of vanilla extract. Now, the nice thing about a trifle, in addition to literally layering your different textures, you're also layering flavor. So you'll see me repeating a few ingredients over and over again, including the brown sugar and the vanilla, to build in the flavor. So when you take a bite of your trifle, you've got that consistent flavor that ties all of these different texture elements together. So just giving this a little toss. And this is just about the same volume of apples that you would put in an apple pie. So the nice thing about a trifle at holiday season is it's a dessert that feeds a crowd. All right, so now I'll set that aside and make the crisp topping, which too is super simple. That's what I like about a trifle. I know you're huge bakers, but if you're new to baking or you don't have a lot of baking equipment, this is one of those recipes. You can bake your apple crisp in any dish you have around that holds that volume of apples and topping. And still, you can assemble a beautiful dessert. Okay, for the crisp topping, I've got my rolled oats, just a little bit of all-purpose flour. If you wanted to, if you're baking this gluten-free, you could certainly use a gluten-free baking blend. It will work absolutely fine in this recipe. And then I have my 100 grams of brown sugar. Like I said, I'm layering in the flavors, and this is where my cinnamon comes in. So I'll add that and just give this a little stir to combine quickly. Is everyone gearing up for the holiday season? I'd love to hear what desserts you have in mind. And of course, I certainly hope this dessert recipe inspires you for the season. I can smell that cinnamon. There we go. I already have my butter melted. And so I'll add that in. And just stir to combine. I used to make crisps using room temperature butter and cut it into the crisp, but there's really no benefit to that in terms of the texture of the end result of the crisp. Unlike making a pie dough where you definitely need to work in the cool butter to build tiny little pieces of butter to make the pastry flaky, with the crisp, I'm just looking to combine all the ingredients together. All right, bring my apples back. And then, oh, there's always that one piece of brown sugar that just won't break down. There you go. And spoon this over the apples. It makes a thin layer, because what I learned when you're making the trifle is you don't want too thick of a crisp layer, or you can't get your spoon through it evenly with the cream and the other elements. And I am adding an extra layer of crunch to this crisp. But I do find it's the right amount when you're making a dessert. Remember, this volume of apples will cook down a fair bit. Okay, this is ready for the oven. You'll put this in a 350 oven, and just like any regular apple crisp, because that's what this is, takes about 40 to 45 minutes to bake up. So give it time. It depends on your apple. If you have softer apples, it'll take less time. Otherwise, really 40 to 45 minutes. Look until your crisp is a nice even golden brown and you're all set. There we go. So while that bakes, I have one that's baked and chilled, and I'll show that to you in a minute. Your next step in the recipe is to make your pastry cream. So all of these components you can make a full day ahead of when you wish to assemble the trifle. And that's another perk behind making a trifle, is you can even assemble the trifle a day ahead. So you can plan this 2 days ahead. Part of good holiday desserts, I find, is successful planning, so that when it comes time that you've got more people than you're used to hosting in your house, you are ready to go, knowing you can worry about the turkey or the beef or whatever it is you serve as a main course, but you know you've got a delicious dessert ready to go. Okay, so this pastry cream, I'm using my contemporary pastry cream method, where I actually put all my ingredients in my pot, cook it, and then it's done. But I'm tailoring the ingredients to suit this trifle. So usually I would make a pastry cream using granulated sugar. I'm using light brown sugar to really build on that caramel flavor to go with the apple and the cream. I like to thicken my pastry cream with cornstarch, so I'm adding that. And additionally, that too, if you were using the gluten-free baking blend in your crisp and gluten-free certified oats, you know your pastry cream is also gluten-free. So I always combine my dry ingredients. So the sugar, it just helps to make sure that the cornstarch won't clump or lump up on me. And then I'm making a slightly richer pastry cream. Typically I use just straight milk, but I've got a combination of half and half cream. That's what we call it here in Canada. I'm not sure, it depends on the country you live in, but you're looking for about a 10% cream. So the kind of cream you add to your coffee. And then semi-skimmed milk, we call that 2% here. And I'll give that a little whisk. So the milk and the cream are cold. And I have 4 egg yolks. So I'm adding those in right away. And before I go to the stove, I'm going to have ready my dish with 2 tablespoons of butter and my vanilla extract. That way, I don't add my vanilla to the pastry cream because it might cook away. If I were to add vanilla bean paste that has the seeds that still lets off flavor with the heat, or if I were adding the seeds of a vanilla bean, you could add that now, the vanilla bean now, or the seeds to extract the flavor. Of course, take the bean itself out before you strain it, and you're ready to go. So now I'm just whisking over medium heat until the pastry cream thickens up. You just see 1 or 2 bubbles break the surface, so you know it's reached the temperature where the cornstarch is fully activated. So this will just take a minute. But this is why you like joining me for a bake along, is that you can see how long really these different steps take. If you are literally baking along with me, and I hope you will, you can always have the screen up, you know the full recipes below, but if you need a moment to get your ingredients or wash your hands, you just hit pause and come back and join me later. You can really tell when a pastry cream is getting close to boiling, so you know you don't need to cook it much longer, because of course you don't wish to overcook it. But you can see right now, I've got lots of frothy bubbles on the surface of the pastry cream, and those frothy bubbles will go away as the milk and the cream heats up and as the cornstarch starts to thicken your pastry cream, and the eggs, of course, as well. So you can see I'm whisking constantly, but not too vigorously. Your time that your pastry cream takes to thicken really does depend on your stove. And of course, you know, we have different heat sources. This happens to be an electric cooktop, and I would say that takes the longest because the burner takes longer to heat up and then cool down. If you have gas or induction, the heat is pretty instant and you have a little more control. That's why you tend to see cooking and bake time ranges, because everybody's oven and everybody's stove is different. And the holiday time is a great time to get to know your oven, that's for certain. All right, I'm seeing some steam, and I can feel the pastry cream starting to thicken. As you feel it start to pull under your whisk, you can tell it's thickening up a little bit. You speed up the whisking a little bit, just to make sure you don't get any uneven cooking. Of course, the heating element is at the bottom, and so your eggs and cornstarch will cook faster at the bottom than at the top, so keep it moving. A pastry cream is traditional to a trifle. Even the classic English trifle with the sponge cake, fruit, sherry, it has a pastry cream layered in it. And so I thought to be familiar as a trifle, because we're getting a little crazy with our apple crisp element, that the pastry cream was essential. But you know, you can make a pastry trifle out of just about anything. One time, Michael and I hosted a holiday open house, and so I built we had close to 200 people arrive at our house, and I thought I need a dessert that I can just leave and people know what to do. So I had multiple trifles layered out on our sideboards, and people did just help themselves. I did a pumpkin chocolate trifle. I did a traditional trifle. I even made a donut trifle. I layered donuts with pastry cream. I have to tell you, I think that was the favorite. And I did do this apple crisp trifle.
All
right, while it's tempting to turn up the heat to speed up the process, you don't want to over-risk overcooking your pastry cream. But a hot tip, if you've never made pastry cream before and you realized that you went a minute over what you should have, if your pastry cream comes out looking more a little like scrambled eggs than a smooth custard, then you know you've overcooked it. Just use an immersion blender or pop it in your blender, blitz it for a second, it'll totally fix it. While it's hot. Okay. And those bubbles are disappearing. I've got the carryover heat of my pot. And I'm just really whisking now to use that residual heat because I'm using a cast iron pot, it really holds the heat. Stainless steel is the same way too. Don't use aluminum if you're making a pastry cream, because the whisk in contact with the aluminum can cause a reaction and your pastry cream turns gray. We don't want that at the holiday time. Okay, nice and smooth. Now I've got my strainer and a little spatula. And it's always a good habit to strain your pastry cream. In case there are any bits of white, egg white cooks at a lower temperature than egg yolk, coagulates. So depending on how your eggs were separated, you may get little egg white bits in there. I'm gonna switch to my whisk because it will be faster. So now the butter is going to cool down the pastry cream, so it will stop the cooking process. And this doesn't look like a lot of pastry cream for a giant trifle, but I'm not done with it yet. This is a very fine strainer, isn't it? This is a very well strained pastry cream. But I don't want to waste any bit. Again, this is a bake along, so I don't want to shortchange you on any steps. It takes the time it takes to do things properly. I just have my little, you know, we call them swaps, to swap out a hot pastry cream for a chilled one so that you see what it looks like. You don't need to sit and wait for it to chill in the fridge, do you? Just wipe my little pastry cream mess here. There we go. And so just take a second to stir the vanilla, let the butter melt into the pastry cream. This will help too, once the butter chills with the pastry cream, sets it up a little bit further. It's nice and silky. Oh, and that vanilla smells really good. There you go. Now what I like to do is you want to put a piece of plastic or parchment right on the surface of the pastry cream. Because it's hot, it might develop a little skin. You let it cool to room temperature, and then you pop it in the fridge to chill. So while your apple crisp is chilling in the fridge to set it up, so is your pastry cream. And here it is, chilled. And what I'd like to do is the finishing touch. Fold in some whipped cream to really lighten it up within this trifle. This is too dense and heavy for layering in the trifle. So I have whipped up some cream and I'm going to fold half of this. So half goes into my whipped cream and then I save half for the top layer on my trifle. Now, if you want to add an extra dimension of flavor, in addition to the vanilla, the brown sugar, and then the cinnamon and the apple crisp, what you can do is use a little bit of bourbon or a little rum if you want, and layer that in. Typically, a traditional trifle has some sort of spirit added to it. The flavor is up to you. If you want to leave it out, please do so. It keeps it family friendly. You don't need to substitute it with anything. This is simply for flavor. It doesn't impact the texture of things enough to have to be substituted. So you stir in your spirits into the chilled pastry cream. So a little goes a long way because you're not cooking it out. And now I'll fold in half of the whipped cream, but in 2 additions. And don't be surprised when you see it soften up initially with the stirring and the folding. That's what happens. But once assembled and your trifle has a chance to chill in the fridge, your trifle will set up. And also the crisp layers absorb some of the moisture a little bit. They don't become soggy, but they become easier to bite through, a nice even bite with this trifle recipe. There we go. So that is a substantial amount of a nice light, fluffy pastry cream. So I'm going to set that aside. So just to show you the combination of ingredients that are going into layering this trifle. I have my chilled apple crisp. So this went into the fridge and you can see any juices from the apples set once they're refrigerated because of the pectin. So you don't have a watery trifle. So we have our cream for the top, our pastry cream, our apple crisp, and then to add an extra layer of crunch, I have some toasted pecans. So these are the components that make up the trifle. So I'll make a little space. And now who here has a trifle bowl? I had one and I think I broke it. But you know what I've discovered over the years, especially that holiday party that I mentioned? Well, I was making multiple trifles. Who has more than one trifle bowl if you even have one? You know what works fantastically well? a really good glass flower vase. You can find them just about anywhere, or perhaps you were given a gift. Just make sure, of course, you clean out the inside very, very well if it had flowers in it. But so long as you've got a vessel that you can see the layers from the side and you can get a spoon into it, of course, you should use it. So, to start the assembly, whoop, I guess I earn my Butterfingers, honestly, don't I? Take spoonfuls of your crisp, and then I break it down a little bit. So you've got that combination of fruit and the crisp layer. You don't want big, big chunks of it. And you'll see in the instructions below that I talk about putting half of the crisp, then half of the cream. Well, that depends on, that's based more on a traditional trifle bowl, which tends to be footed and a little bit wider, yet less tall. So it depends on your vessel. If you have a nice big tall flower vase, just make sure you can fit it in the fridge. You may stack this in 3, maybe even 4 layers. So I want a nice substantial layer. And if you want to continue adding spirits, this is a great place to sprinkle in a little bit more bourbon or rum if you wanted to, just a little bit on top, not too much. And then I want to be careful with my cream. Try not to get drips on the side of the bowls, the side of the trifle bowl. There we go. So we're already creating distinctive layers. And then a nice sprinkling, a layer of the toasted pecans. If you wanted to maple toast them, toss them in a little bit of maple syrup. You could even add a pinch of cinnamon and then bake them. They take about 12 minutes in a 350 oven. That adds another element of sweetness. So now you can see in a single layer, you've got the apple at the bottom, the crisp, the cream, and then the crunch of the pecans. And now we layer again with the apple, crisp, cream, pecans. And on we go. And I don't have one chilling. This is a real-time recipe. So I can show you how easy it is to assemble. Just to let you know, this is a 12 cup, so a 3-liter vessel that fits the combinations I have in front of you. I think you could, if you're measuring 2.5 liters or a 10-cup vessel would work fine. Any smaller, you'll probably be left with leftover elements, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Or any bigger, if it's a 4-liter container, you might have a gap at the top. This is looking good. So now you can see as I'm scooping the crisp, I have to kind of crack through that crisp topping. So sitting in the fridge for a few hours, but as I said, you can make this a full day ahead. That crisp will soften up a little bit. It won't lose its crunch altogether, but it'll be easier to scoop through. I think now it's easier to do the last few layers once you get closer to the top. There we go. And so, wow, out of this vase / trifle bowl, I'm getting 4 layers of the crisp. But as people dig in, everyone is going to get the same proportion of fruit, crisp topping, cream, and pecans, which is nice. Get every little bit. Last of the cream. Oh, I forgot to add bourbon on a couple of my layers. I'll just put a little sprinkle on this layer. If it's not there, you wouldn't even miss it. Move this out of the way, and it's about time for my last layer. My whipped cream. And at this point, there's nothing in the whipped cream, so I will add just a touch of sugar. You can add a splash of vanilla. And if you are adding the bourbon or rum, add your little bit of bourbon or rum, or it could be another spirit if you want. Apple brandy is a popular choice. It matches with your apple crisp. And then it's traditional to finish the top of a trifle with whipped cream. If you're making your crisp a day ahead, a good idea, a trick you've probably heard me say on this channel before, is to put a skim milk powder in your cream when you whip it. It stabilizes the cream. For every 1 cup of fluid cream that you whip, add 1 tablespoon of instant skim milk powder. You can add it at any point in the whipping process, at the beginning or at the end. The protein in the skim milk powder bonds with the fat, and that's what stabilizes your whipped cream. It's a great tip, even if you're just whipping cream to have beside something over the holidays. It means you can whip your cream ahead of time and it won't weep. You just can put it in a bowl in the fridge. Finishing touch, a little cinnamon, couple pecans. I always like, it's a great idea if you're serving a dessert to a group and you may not be there to attend to it all the time. If there are nuts in the dessert, I always like to make them visible so that anyone dipping in, if there's a nut allergy, or if someone doesn't like pecans, at least they know the nuts are in there. So there it is, a grand apple crisp trifle that I've assembled just in front of you. Like I said, this is a great make ahead. You can pop it in the fridge, let it set, and then you just get that. Where did my big spoon? I used it for my apples. A big spoon, lovely dishes, and in we go. That balance of cream and fruit. Oh, I'm gonna dive in there a little. I want some of that pastry cream. This makes such a delicious dessert and a bit of a twist on a classic holiday preparation. I really hope you'll give this recipe a try. Don't forget, you've got a delicious apple crisp recipe, just even if you don't make the trifle. We've got a lot of baking skills here, yet not a lot of high-tech baking equipment. Enjoy the holiday season, enjoy your time with family and friends. A recipe like this means you can make it ahead and enjoy those moments. Make new memories, make those traditional recipes, and I love to hear what recipes you make over the holiday season. Don't forget to share, and I'll see you again soon for another delicious festive recipe. The toasted pecans really add a level of complexity in terms of taste and texture to this trifle. So good. Happy holiday baking, everyone.